In Louisiana, the air never quite sits still, and neither do the shadows. Cypress branches lean low over dark water, old porches creak with their own quiet warnings, and every back road feels like it remembers something it isn't ready to tell. This is a place built on wild beauty and deep sorrow, tradition and turmoil, superstition that is woven right into the daily rhythm of life. And in the middle of all that history and haunt, there are cases that slip through the cracks. There are the lives left unresolved and mysteries that never stopped whispering from between the pines. Tonight, we're stepping into 12 of them. These are the stories that Louisiana kept, the ones that never found justice and never received answers. This is 12 Unsolved, Louisiana. Let's go find what's been waiting. Welcome back to the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and I'm so glad you've joined me for another episode of 12 Unsolved. For our first case out of Louisiana, we have to step all the way back to 1948. On a cool autumn evening in November of 1948, William Baker drove to the home of his friends, Sam and Mary Paola, in Winsboro, Louisiana. Sam and William both had an interest in shortwave radios, and William was going to ask Sam for help with his own radio. He made it to their house around 5 p.m., but when he knocked, no one answered. He decided to go and check and see if maybe Sam was still at the electronics store that he owned. But when he got there, the store was closed and the doors were locked. William drove back to Sam and Mary's house, and after no answer again, he decided to look into some of the windows. And when he got to the kitchen, he looked in the window and saw Sam lying on the floor in a pool of blood. William immediately contacted the police. The police found Sam dressed only in underwear with 2 gunshot wounds from a .22 pistol. Mary was found in her nightgown and had also been shot twice. Neighbors later said they heard some noise around 3 o'clock in the morning, but just thought it was firecrackers being shot off by revelers that weren't quite finished with their Halloween celebration. There was no sign of forced entry into the home, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. Mary's jewelry and purse were still untouched on her dresser. Police questioned several people in the weeks to follow and showed special interest in a neighbor of Sam and Mary's, but no arrests were ever made. I know it seems like a long shot, but perhaps you've heard a family story from a grandparent and possibly have information about Sam and Mary's murders. If you do, please contact the Winsboro Police Department at 318-435-4307. On March 15, 1979, 23-year-old Arilla Webb experienced one of those annoyances we have all probably faced at one time or another, a flat tire. She had just dropped her husband off at the Eastgate Shopping Center in Shreveport, and before she got too far from the shopping center, she had to pull off onto the shoulder of the road due to the tire. The tire was punctured but not completely flat. Witnesses saw a man in a truck pull up behind her, and Arilla hasn't been seen since. Initially, authorities thought that she left of her own accord, as she'd been distressed around the time of her disappearance. A few days before she vanished, she had written her mother and told her that if anything happened to her, she wanted her mother to have her vehicle, not her husband. To me, that sounds like Arilla and her husband were not getting along, but that doesn't ever seem to have come up in the investigation, at least not publicly. A month after Arilla's disappearance, there was another missing person from the same shopping center. Dodie Gay was an 18-year-old high school student, and like Arilla, her car had a punctured tire. Witnesses saw a male in a pickup pull up behind Dodie's vehicle as if he was there to assist her. Due to the similarities, the cases are thought to be connected. Dodie's remains were found in DeSoto Parish 6 weeks after she disappeared. Police have named serial killer James Edward Wood as a suspect in both cases, but there's never been enough evidence to convict him of either. If you have any information about Arilla's disappearance, please contact the Bossier Parish Sheriff's Office at 318-965-2203. July 12, 1987 was a steamy summer day in Wagaman, Louisiana. Vicky Carriere was headed on a fishing trip with her fiancé and father of her soon-to-be-born child, Joseph Phillips. They stopped at the Time Saver convenience store in Wagaman, and Joseph went into the store while Vicky waited in the car. According to Joseph, when he returned to the car, Vicky had disappeared and had taken her bundle of clothing that she'd packed for the fishing trip. He never reported her missing and never contacted her family. Her family was concerned when Vicky didn't return from the trip, and then when she failed to show up at her baby shower a week later, they knew that something was horribly wrong. They reported her as a missing person. Joseph was the only suspect in Vicky's disappearance, but law enforcement never had any evidence to charge him with anything. He died in 2002 at the age of 57, and whatever information he had about Vicky's disappearance went to the grave with him. If you have any information about her disappearance, please contact the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office at 504-832-2300. On a fair spring night in 1991, a teenage son walked into a scene that no child should ever have to see. His father, 50-year-old Luther Michel, lay dead on the bedroom floor of his Shreveport, Louisiana home. He had been knocked out of his wheelchair, and there was a knife on the floor beside him. He had been stabbed multiple times in the neck and chest. There was blood smeared on the kitchen floor, so it appeared as though the assault started there and Luther was able to make it as far as his bedroom. The phone line to his house had been cut, so he couldn't call for help. There were still streamers and balloons decorating Luther's living room, remnants of his birthday party a month before. There were some items missing from Luther's home, and his car had been stolen. Authorities were able to recover his car by the next day. They believe that the robbery was the motive. His children are convinced that their father's murderer had to be someone who knew him, and that his partial paralysis was why he was targeted. If you have any information about Luther's murder, please contact Crime Stoppers at 318-673-7373. On a sunny spring day in April of 1994, Kathy Griffin left her home in Oakdale, Louisiana, telling her mother, "I'll be back, Mama," before walking out the door. On May 25th of the next year, skeletal remains of a woman were found at the Old Folks Hunting Club, roughly 1.5 miles southwest of Plainview High School in Rapides Parish, Louisiana. A couple of months later, an employee at the coroner's office made a clay model of the unknown woman's face, and it was shown on local television. Kathy's mother saw it and noticed how much the eyes looked like her daughter's. She reached out to authorities, and dental records later confirmed that the remains were those of Kathy. She had been killed by a blow to the back of the head. Authorities were unable to determine if she'd been murdered in the woods where she was found, or if her body had been dumped there. Kathy had a history of drug addiction and had recently been in a rehabilitation center before her disappearance, but had returned to stay with her mother until she could get back on her feet. Family members said that her mother always took good care of Kathy. She left behind 3 children. If you have any information about Kathy's murder, please contact the Oakdale Police Department at 318-335-0290. Herbert Stanley Burke III, who went by Stan, was 49, and he loved his job at Court Furniture Store in Metairie, Louisiana. He had worked there for 20 years, and that's where he was headed on the morning of December 29, 1996. When Stan arrived at the store, he was confronted by an unknown assailant and was forced into the building. The assailant then stabbed him repeatedly and then shot him in the face and chest 5 times. The violence of the murder seemed personal. A couple of weeks after Stan's murder, his assistant, Gerald Drago, was arrested, but not for Stan's murder. Gerald was arrested for embezzling over $315,000 from the furniture store in the 2 years that he'd worked there. Stan had noticed some discrepancies in the finances and had asked another employee to check on them, but Gerald volunteered to do that instead. Well, how generous of him. He was quickly named by the Jefferson Parish investigators as the main suspect in Stan's murder. However, Their case was only circumstantial, and they didn't have enough evidence to make a case against him that would stick in court. Stan's case has been cold for almost 30 years. If you have any information that could help solve the murder of Stan Burke, please contact the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office at 504-363-5500. On a spring morning in 2001, 2-year-old Wesley Dale Morgan was playing with a litter of puppies on the porch of his family's home in Clinton, Louisiana. According to his mother, 19-year-old Ruby Harvard, she went inside around 9:45 to make lunch and left Wesley on the porch. Now, if you think her making lunch at 9:45 in the morning and leaving a 2-year-old alone outside is sketchy, just wait. When Ruby returned to the porch, Wesley was missing. She called the authorities and a large-scale search was initiated. The search included the National Guard, helicopters with infrared technology, along with searches on foot and horseback, and there was no sign of Wesley. At the time of his disappearance, Ruby and Wesley were living with a man named Burnell Hilton Jr., who was 37 years old. Not long after Wesley's disappearance, he was charged with attempted murder and a shooting from 1998, and I wasn't able to find out what became of his charges. After the search failed to turn up any evidence of Wesley being in the area, his case became a criminal investigation, but it quickly went dormant and it stayed that way for 10 years. In the meantime, Ruby had another child, and in 2008, she was charged with allegedly attempting to sell that child. And the charges were later dropped, but this led to speculation that perhaps Ruby had sold Wesley. When the case was reopened, there wasn't much new information discovered, at least not that was released to the public. According to authorities, Ruby is refusing to speak to any law enforcement agency. She said it was on the advice of her attorney, but her attorney said that she told Ruby not to talk to them unless she had an attorney present. So, nice try, Ruby. Someone knows what happened to Wesley, and authorities believe he's still alive. He would be 26 years old today. If you have any information about Wesley's disappearance, please contact the FBI at 800-225-5324. The weekend of March 28, 2010 was perfect fishing weather, so Earl Bubba Kidder Jr., 39, and a couple of his friends decided to take advantage of it. His friend Chad picked him up along with another friend, Ricky, and the three headed to the Sherburne Wildlife Management Area outside of Opelousas, Louisiana. Bubba called his mother that same day and told her the fishing was going well and that the three friends were having a good time. That was the last time his mother ever heard from him. When the two friends woke up the next morning, Bubba was gone and so was Chad's car. There was no note or any other indication as to where Bubba had gone or why he had gone. Later that week, Chad's car was found on a remote road near the Little Alabama Bayou, which is in the same area, and the vehicle had been purposely and thoroughly burned. The friends were questioned at length and were unable to provide any information about Bubba's disappearance and were never officially named as suspects. His family believes that Bubba had met with foul play. If you have any information about his disappearance, please contact the St. Martin Parish Sheriff's Office at 337-394-3071. On March 30, 2011, Claxton Mark Mayo, who went by Mark, was involved in an accident in Monroe, Louisiana. The 43-year-old lost control of the Suburban he was driving, and it flipped 3 times. Shortly after the accident, Mark was captured on CCTV entering a convenience store, and the footage showed that he was obviously injured. Oddly, while there was footage of him entering the store, there was none of him leaving. It's thought he had to have gone out the back, and that he possibly left with a truck driver. Mark hasn't been heard from since. It's thought he might possibly have amnesia from his accident, and it's also possible that perhaps he was driving impaired and didn't want to get caught at the scene, and then later met with foul play. If you have any information about Mark's disappearance, please contact the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office at 504-363-5500. Leon Smokey Breyer might have been 99 years old, but he still lived alone. He still cooked for himself, still ironed his clothes, and was known to still dance on the front porch of his New Orleans home and wink at the pretty women as they walked by. His daughter said his longevity was due to his daily breakfast of 2 eggs, bacon, ham, or a pork chop, grits, toast, coffee, and a steady diet of Milwaukee's best beer. On February 22nd, 2012, someone forever ended Leon's dancing. A friend of Leon's would check on him every day, and on the morning of February 23rd, 2012, he found the front door to Leon's house unlocked, and Leon was in his recliner, dead. Natural causes were naturally assumed as his cause of death, but his family still insisted on an autopsy. The results showed that Leon had been strangled and suffocated to death. It is especially heinous to me to murder someone who is so near at the end of their life. Why cut it short? Soon after his murder, police announced that there was a 33-year-old woman they wanted to speak to in connection to Leon's death. But a week later, they released a statement that she was no longer a person of interest. There have been no further developments in Leon's case. On March 26, 2012, the Louisiana Senate passed a resolution to express condolences to Leon's family and friends due to the huge impact he'd made in his neighborhood. And I'll leave a link to the resolution in the description box if you want to read it for yourself. If you have any information in Leon's case, please contact the New Orleans Police Department at 504-821-2222. 57-year-old Bruce Gutierrez began the morning of April 24, 2012, much like any other day. He was a bank president as well as the CFO of a real estate development company in St. Tammany Parish, Louisiana. When he got to the office, he received a call about some investment property at the Mark 7 apartment complex in New Orleans East. Never one to pass up an opportunity, Bruce made his way to the complex to look at property. When he arrived at the apartments, he realized that the address he'd been given was incorrect, so he went to speak to the building manager, hoping to straighten it out. However, the manager, nor anyone else that worked at the complex, knew anything about Bruce looking at property that day. While Bruce was walking back to his truck, he was shot and died at the scene. At the time, police said that it was an armed robbery, but that is doubted by some. There have been claims of mafia involvement and insurance claims, but no theory has led to any arrest. Police released a description of a suspect, a male in his mid-20s, between 5'9" and 6 feet tall, with a slim build. He was clean-shaven and has a possibly light brown complexion, was wearing a black knit cap, a thick black jacket with a hood underneath, black pants, and black shoes. In 2021, police announced that they were looking for 2 people in connection to the crime. They thought that possibly these people had pertinent information, but nothing seems to have come from that, nor is there any indication if the police ever spoke with them or not. So was Bruce's case as simple as him being at the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it a setup? If you have any information about his murder, please contact Crime Stoppers of Greater New Orleans at 504-822-1111. It's been 8 years since Nanette Crennel's home in Lacombe, Louisiana went up in flames. When firefighters entered the home on that summer day in 2017, Nanette, 49, was found dead inside. The initial ruling was a suicide, but after subsequent autopsies, her death was ruled a homicide. She had been shot in the head, and the fire is believed to have been started to cover up evidence. Whoever started the fire doused the DVR in the living room with an accelerant, and that was the DVR that held all of the surveillance camera recordings. So even though there were 9 security cameras on the house, there were no recordings from any of them. Nanette's husband, Steve, was the fire chief of St. Tammany Parish's fire department at the time, and he was the initial suspect. He had had an affair, but according to him, he and Nanette had worked past it. According to Nanette's family, however, she wanted to leave him. He has since been cleared of any suspicion, but there are still those who aren't convinced he's innocent. He had an alibi for the time of the crime, but some people think he might have hired someone else for the job. The month before Nanette was killed, she had sent an email to her father with a photo of an unknown man attached to it. She told her father that the man had been outside her house and he creeped her out, and she felt as though she was being followed. I would think that if someone knew that the surveillance camera recorded to the DVR in the living room, it would have had to have been someone very familiar with the house, or at least have had someone very familiar with the house tell them about the DVR. Nanette's case is still open. If you have any information about her murder, please contact the City of New Orleans Crime Stoppers at 877-903-7867. Another 12 lives disrupted, and more loved ones left in the dark, left to wonder what happened. 12 among the thousands across our country. In our next episode of 12 Unsolved, we're heading up to Maine, where we'll look in dark woods heavy with snow and along rocky coastlines for more mysterious disappearances and unsolved murders. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be back soon with more true crime. Until then, stay safe and be happy.